Now that we've all got our exams back, we've had a look at our marks, this is probably equally as important as the revision and the completion of the exam. So we're going to go through our exam review. It'll more than likely be in two parts, so make sure that you thoroughly go through each part. Question 1. So we're looking at the idea of increased levels of carbon monoxide. You don't actually need to know what that means because they outline it for you. So they said increased levels of carbon monoxide in the air reduce the oxygen carrying capacity of hemoglobin in the human body. Describe the most likely physical response of the heart when muscle cells are not receiving enough oxygen. So I've looked at a couple of things. So we're looking at acute responses to exercise as the main concept. So, if the body is not getting enough oxygen, the heart will increase its heart rate. So with the increase in heart rate, we'll see an increase in blood flow. And then the reason this will happen is the reduced oxygen carrying capacity of the hemoglobin, more blood will be needed to cycle around the body to make up for the fact that we haven't got the oxygen carrying capacity. All right, identify the two events in the table above which of the two events table which more likely expose the athlete to increased levels of carbon monoxide. Explain one physiological effect of this exposure on the athlete's performance. So one mark would just be to be able to identify the which event. So it's obviously the 1500 meter race. I think only one person got that right, but in terms of acknowledging that's an aerobic event, it's pretty stock standard. So we'll see an increased breathing rate during this event because it requires the aerobic system. If there is an increased carbon monoxide levels, the increased breathing rate will see more monoxide breathed in. So the effect of this will reduce the efficiency of the oxygen delivery, meaning the athlete will require lactic acid system to have an increased contribution, resulting in an onset of blood lactate accumulation and fatigue. The athlete will then not be able to sustain that high aerobic intensity, resulting in a slower time to the onset of fatigue. All right, so 3 marks. That's a fairly detailed response there. Question C. So with specific reference to the respiratory system, give one reason why athletes are likely to inhale more pollutants when they are exercising than when we are at rest. So looking at the fact that oxygen demands during exercise, so it would have been clear to outline the muscle cells need increased levels of oxygen. So for aerobic respiration, so produce the required energy aerobically so we don't have that lactic acid byproduct. Because of this increased oxygen requirement, the athlete will have an increased breathing rate. So there's 2 of your marks there, and obviously showing a detailed response would get you that 3rd one. So which see them more likely to inhale any pollutants in the air compared to when they are rest. So again, referring back to the question in your answer. Choose one of the following physiological responses and explain how it will help an athlete to deal with the increased exposure to carbon monoxide in the air during the race. So I thought the easiest one there was increased volume of hemoglobin, straight up. Some people looked at density of capillaries and one person looked at myoglobin, but I thought generally the most easiest one was hemoglobin. So increased volume of hemoglobin. So more hemoglobin volume will mean that if there is any carbon monoxide exposure, then whatever hemoglobin is affected, the increased volume will allow for adequate oxygen to get to the muscle cells to maintain that steady state. So that's how it would allow the athlete to continue to work. Increased hemoglobin will allow that increased oxygen capacity, the carrying capacity, which would allow for some of it to be hindered by the carbon monoxide. So question 2 looks at students A, B, C and D completing an aerobic fitness test and record a similar level of aerobic fitness. They undertook different aerobic fitness training programs. Refer to the following graph which shows the response of the 4 students to their individual fitness training. So we can see how they've all at the start recorded about the same, and then you can see the increase or decline in aerobic fitness over the 3 months. So first one, state a reason for completing a fitness test before undertaking a fitness program. So fitness tests allow for indication of improvement. Doing it at the start of the training program allows the athletes to have a starting point to measure from, 1 mark. All right, so no analysis required, just why would you do it? So with reference to the graph above, explain which student A, B or C 1 made initial gains in aerobic fitness but did not continue to apply the principle of overload. So Athlete C was clear. We can see a 10% improvement over the first month and then plateau over the next 2 months where there was no improvement. All right. So again, pulling information off the graph. I can't stress enough, the people that did not get the marks did not pull the information off the graph. So a lot of people did it really well, but getting that 10% and showing then me, try not to describe what's happening in the graph. You can just use the information and straight away know what you're talking about. So which one found the training load too difficult? Reevaluate the training program and reduce training intensity to allow for physical adaptations to aerobic fitness. So we can see B shows a 5% decrease in aerobic fitness in the first month. And then once the program has been adapted, they move to a 10% increase at the end of month 2 and then a 20% increase at the end of month 3. So again, just simple explaining what's happening in the graph by pulling information off of it. All right. Student D reported higher levels of fatigue daily and decreased aerobic fitness, despite training very hard every day. With reference to a training principle, explain one likely cause of student D's decreased aerobic fitness. Now, a lot of people talked about overload. All right, a couple of people talked about specificity, and that was the one we're looking at. So athlete D may have not been applying the principle of specificity, while they may have been working very hard. By the looks of it, they were not training their aerobic fitness appropriately, thus reversibility occurs. Explain the decrease in aerobic fitness by nearly 15%. So again, I've talked about how much they've decreased, but talking about specificity, again, that was a difficult question. But you would have only lost 1.5 marks there if you weren't specific to specificity. All right, so next we've got a talent ID program to 17-year-olds from 2 schools, boys and a girls' school. So we can see the different results there. So we can see, identify which school A or B is likely to be the boys' school. So school A, so examples could be the beep test results, lower sit and reach flexibility results. So I think everyone got that right, which was good. So 1 mark for that. So with reference to one of the tests in the table, so straight away you got a reference to test in the table. Explain one physiological reason for the difference in the results for males and females. So I've picked an easy one, talking about males have more power. So vertical jump, school A 44, school B 35 centimetres. So straight away I've pulled information off the graph. A lot of people didn't do that. You need to do that, and we need to practice doing that a lot. So males have an increased muscle mass than females on average. This would lead to more powerful movements such as jumping, resulting in an increased testing level in the vertical jump. All right. So the third part of that question. One student from school B excelled in the vertical jump, recording a result of 54 centimetres. Explain which type of muscle fibre enabled the student to jump so high. I think everyone bar one person got this right. So that was looking at increase of white muscle fibres, so fast twitch, and then explaining what that does. So having an increased percentage of these allows for more explosive or powerful movements, such as a vertical leap. All right, the fourth part there. Explain how 6 weeks of living at altitude training and training at sea level may improve school A in their multi-stage fitness test results. So, living at altitude can lead to adaptations such as increased hemoglobin and red blood cell count, increased myoglobin, increased capillarization of alveoli and skeletal muscle. So what I wanted to see is you to be able to identify some of those adaptations and then talk about how that would impact the results. So all those things lead to an increased VO2 max, which allows the athlete to work at a higher aerobic intensity for longer, thus potentially moving their beep test result from, say, level 12 to, say, level 13. Okay. Question 4. 2 cyclists, each weighing 70 kilos, participated in a stationary cycle test to the point of exhaustion, starting at an intensity that produced 2 millimoles per litre of blood lactate. One cyclist was aerobically trained, the other one was untrained. Refer to the following graph, which shows the result of the test. So, before we even answer the questions, people got messed up. They did not read the x-axis properly. So, the horizontal axis. We can see the power output is not the same on both. So even though the graphs look the same, the power output for cyclist A starts at 120 and finishes at 200. And cyclist B, it starts at 210 and finishes at 290, which suggests that cyclist B has some much more power output for the blood lactate that they're accumulating. So, question A. What is the name given to point X on the graph for cyclist A? It's not lactate threshold, it's obla. So obla is occurring at this point. Lactate threshold would be along where they just have such a level of obla that they would not be able to cycle anymore. So blood lactate is occurring at this point. So I get a half a mark if you mention lactate threshold, but it's obla. Identify which of the two cyclists A or B was untrained with specific reference to the appropriate graph. Explain your answer. Lots of people got this wrong. They just did not read the graph properly. And that's why it says, with specific reference to the appropriate graph, all you need to do is pull information off. So it was clearly untrained cyclist was A. We can see at 160 power output, so 160 watts, cyclist A had 4 millimoles of blood lactate, where cyclist B has 4 millimoles of blood lactate at 250 watt power output. B is cycling a significantly higher intensity with the same lactate buildup. Okay, so again, it was a really good question to be able to pull information off the graphs and support your answer. Those people that got the answers incorrect didn't pull the appropriate information off. What would be the most likely effect on performance if cyclist A tried to maintain power output of 170 watts for an extended period of time? Give you a reason for your answer. So cyclist A, at 160 watts, they would go into OBLA. If cyclist A continued to pedal at 170, they would have severe OBLA, meaning that the intensity could not be maintained due to severe fatigue. So they could not do that over a long period of time. They would be fatigued. All right. Question 5. Refer to the following graph which shows the percentage contribution of various energy fuels during 2 hours of moderate exercise. So 70% VO2 max by an athlete before and after extended training program. So you can see the breakdown there. After training has a high percentage of muscle triglycerides, fats, and when we're not looking at a particular training session, we're looking at after a training program. So some people got caught up and said, well, people were using more carbs before training than they had the training session, and then after training they were using more fats. It's after a program. So using data from the graph above, identify the trend in the use of muscle triglycerides as a source of fuel for the athlete before and after extended training program. So as a trend, I just pulled information off. So before training program, fats used for about 22% of moderate exercise. After training program, fats used for about 45% of moderate exercise. So this suggests there's about a 23% increase in fats usage after the training program. So that is just looking at the trend. That's just analysis of the data there. That's not having to have any knowledge about anything. That's just pulling information off and showing some sort of trend. Identify the type of training that's likely to produce this trend. So the easiest one would have just been continuous training. All right, continuous training at 70% VO2 max. There's the information you need. That's going to help utilize your muscle triglycerides. What performance advantage may muscle triglycerides give an athlete in an endurance event, such as a marathon? So, one, fats release more units of energy per gram than carbohydrates, so therefore they can lead to longer sustained energy periods. If an athlete glycogen spares, they can prolong fuel depletion and use glycogen at any periods of race that may require a higher energy output or intensity output. So there's 2 marks. And I said lots of people got that right. Identify one chronic muscular adaptation to aerobic training program that would produce the performance advantage that you identified in part B. All right. Give reasons for your answer. So, all right, increased fuel stores at muscles due to muscular hypertrophy would allow for more glycogen storage. Some people talked about mitochondria, which was great. Some people talk about capillarization at the muscle, which was great. When people started talking into motor unit recruitment, it increased power and things like that, that's anaerobic. We're looking at aerobic changes. So even though that increased fuel stores at the muscle due to muscular hypertrophy, that relates back to that part B there. But those other